You can do all the right things and not be in right relationship. Just want to let that hang over our time this morning. And in the spirit of relationships, in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I want to tell you all a love story, a love-ish story. It's definitely not your typical Hollywood love story. Joel and Clementine have broken up painfully. Did I just hear, oh, right? What a start to a love story. One reason this breakup is so painful is the depth and the richness of Joel and Clementine's love for each other. It's what makes the breakup so tragic. And it wasn't just one thing, one moment that led to the breakup, but over time, it was a series of little moments that built on each other. Struggles to communicate, feelings of dissatisfaction, arguments, insecurities, right? It's all there. And after all this time, the wounds between them are as deep as the love that they've shared. And the breakup makes the pain unbearable. And in the world of Joel and Clementine, there is a futuristic technology that can erase a person completely from your memory. This is obviously from a movie. But in this story, to end her own pain, Clementine goes in and she has this procedure done, erasing Joel from her memory completely. And when Joel finds out that Clementine has done this, he is utterly devastated. And so he goes in to do the same thing. Now, this is a Valentine's Day story, am I right? Well, there's a subplot to this love story. Enter Patrick, one of the technicians responsible for erasing all of Joel's memories. As Patrick goes through Joel's memories and he's working backwards, he's erasing them one by one, Patrick finds himself infatuated with the Clementine he finds in Joel's memories. And Patrick makes a plan. He is going to use Joel's memories to help him pursue Clementine and win her affection. Like this key moment in Joel and Clementine's love story when they went to this beautiful frozen lake together, and there they laid on the ice looking up at the stars, experiencing this just peace together. Patrick sees this memory and he takes Clementine to the exact same frozen lake. Or then there was the time when Joel gave Clementine this thoughtful, spontaneous gift of jewelry. And Patrick sees in the memory how much Clementine loved the jewelry. And so he gives her jewelry as well. And then in one of their happiest moments together, Joel says to Clementine, you know, I could die right now. I'm just happy. I've never felt that before. I'm just exactly where I want to be. And so Patrick, word for word, also says this to Clementine. And because Patrick has seen Clementine respond to Joel across a variety of moments and a variety of memories, Patrick, he has this sense, he feels like he gets her. And so when he's with her, he often acts like he knows what Clementine wants and how she feels. And with each act of imitation, Clementine falls deeper and deeper for Patrick. Nope, I'm just kidding. It's the opposite of that. Right? And I hope as you hear this story, like something in you goes, there's something not quite right about this. And that's how Clementine felt. She did not fall for Patrick. At each point where Clementine responded to Joel's advances with openness and affection where Joel's actions deepened their love, Patrick's imitation was received with discomfort and confusion and even irritation, right? Like Clementine senses that something is missing. She seems unsettled by his action, and she never responds to Patrick in the same way that she did Joel. But even if Patrick's imitation had worked, I think many of us would still feel kind of gross about it. Like there's something about Patrick's actions that feel like a violation of love. There's something not quite right about Patrick and his pursuit of Clementine. And the Sermon on the Mount helps name what is missing. The most common translation of Matthew chapter 5, verse 6 says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." That word righteousness, it's so churchy. Like, what does it even mean? I remember leading a Bible study in college, and we were studying Romans together, and none of us could get our heads around this word righteousness. And for nearly 20 years, I've wrestled with this word. I've read commentaries and lexicons and Bible scholars and theologians to help me try to make sense of it, and often I just feel underwhelmed. But I think the team at the Bible Project have landed somewhere helpful. In their translation of the Greek word dikaiosune, they have gone with the phrase right relationships. So that in their translation, Matthew 5, verse 6 reads, "How good is life, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for right relationships." In other places in the sermon, they then translate this same word as a reference to the kinds of actions that make a relationship right. So that Jesus will talk about prayer and fasting and giving to those in need as the right kinds of actions that help us to have a right relationship with God. But he says doing these actions isn't enough, right? There is a way, a right way to do these right actions, a way that actually nurtures right relationship. Jesus also tells us we are to pursue, we are to seek a right relationship with God and with others first, as primary, before anything else, and that he will take care of the things that we need. Jesus contrasts this pursuit of right relationships, this hunger and thirst for right relationships, to the ways the religious leaders of his day are doing relationships. And Jesus announces that your only chance to participate in the kingdom of heaven, your only chance to enter the kingdom is if you're doing what is right exceeds that of the religious leaders. And here's where I want us to consider Joel and Patrick. Joel gives us a picture of somebody who pursues right relationship, and Patrick, somebody who pursues the right actions but misses the right relationship. Here's what's crazy about the story of these two men and their pursuit of Clementine. Joel and Patrick are working with the same raw materials, right? The exact set of actions. Their basic playbook is pretty standard for most love stories, like real love stories or cinematic ones, right? How do you deepen your love? How do you deepen your affection for somebody? You spend time together, you give each other gifts, you speak affirming words, you work to understand each other, right? Like this, in a real way, like isn't rocket science. And yet, there's something about how Joel does these four things with Clementine that expands their love. And there's something about how Patrick does these four things in the exact same ways that Joel did them, that shrinks or that stands in the way of love. This is what we get to wrap our heads around, that two people can do the exact same things in the name of love, and one results in right relationship and the other creates a relationship that just feels wrong. You can do all the right things and not be in right relationship. I know I've framed this around a Valentine's Day story, but this is all relationships. This is one of the core themes of the Sermon on the Mount. In fact, you might say that right relationship is the defining characteristic of Jesus' kingdom. I mean, Jesus sums up the law by saying, love God with your whole self and love your neighbor as yourself. Relationships are the defining characteristic where God is in right relationship with his people and his people are in right relationship with each other, and all that God has made is right in relation to everything else and to him. Right relationships are the thing that God is at work doing. It's the thing that he is about. I really do not think it's an exaggeration to say in the kingdom of Jesus, relationships are everything. And so consider then what that means for us here and now. With an analogy. I don't know if any of you have ever imagined or thought about climbing Mount Everest. I have not. But we probably all know enough about Mount Everest to know that being on the top of the mountain is different than being at the bottom of the mountain. Life at the top is different than life at the bottom. If you've ever experienced any kind of elevation sickness, you know there's a big difference between the top and the bottom. I see some heads nodding with me, right? And so you can't simply start at the bottom, look at the mountain, go, I'm going to go to the top, because you're not ready. You're not equipped to make that journey to the top of the mountain. Your lungs, your blood are not adapted to the conditions at the top of the mountain. You would not survive. And so there's this elaborate preparation process that's involved, right? Where your body needs extensive exposure to high altitude with low oxygen conditions. And then even when you get to the mountain, you will go through this multi-week process of adapting to the conditions at higher elevations, coming back down away, going back up even higher, coming back down again. It's a deal. You cannot survive on Mount Everest without proper training and adaptation. The same is true of the kingdom of heaven. If God's kingdom is all about right relationships, but you're not interested in right relationships, you will never be at home in the kingdom. You will always feel like you are gasping for air. It is an air that you are not accustomed to breathing, that you have not adapted to, that you are not ready to live in and survive in. You will have no idea how to breathe in the kingdom of heaven, and the right relationships of God's kingdom will suffocate you. There's a sense at which we are at base camp, training with our lives together, how to live and breathe for an eternity of right relationships. We are in the adaptation phase, preparing to climb the mountain. It's easy to miss this because many of us feel pretty good, feel like we know the right things to do in relationships. But we often settle for doing the right things, falling short of right relationships. Because doing the right things and being in right relationship are not the same thing. Right relationships are, in a way, infinitely more demanding. Which is why they're also infinitely more rewarding. It shouldn't surprise us that the longest running scientific study trying to figure out what makes human beings, people, truly happy over the course of a lifetime, it continues to report almost 100 years since it first started that when people get to the end of their lives, the one thing that people report that contributes more than anything else to their happiness are meaningful relationships. So think about this for a second. Meaningful relationships are the ultimate reward of a life lived well here on earth, which makes sense because Jesus teaches us to pray to our Father, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And if relationships are most important in heaven, it makes sense that God would make those heavenly relationships available to us here now in anticipation of heaven. But God isn't just preparing us to climb the top of the mountain. God is bringing the top of the mountain down to us. God makes his home among us here. Right, but like I said, these rewarding relationships are demanding. And many of us don't yet feel at home in them yet. It's easy to take someone to a beautiful lake because you saw that it worked for someone else. It's so much harder to be present with a real human being in front of us, to actually connect with that person where they are at, where you are at, so that any place you are at might become a kind of frozen lake moment. One of my own early frozen lake moments with Jane took place, she's looking around like she's nervous, took place on a car drive from Portland back to where we lived near Seattle. There is no person anywhere who could have told me that to get Jane to fall for me, I should drive with her for 3 hours in the middle of the night. Jane can hardly stay awake in a car at night. They would not have told me that I should sing every word of my boy band mixtape at the top of my lungs. That would not have been in their recommendations. They could not have told me I should get pulled over by the cops and have to take a field sobriety test because the cop thought I was drunk because I just talk with my hands and swerve a lot. They could not have told me that at the last minute, rather than driving back to our houses, I should just take a detour to the beach, even though Jane had work in just a few hours that next morning, right? Like, there's no formula for that. I was just present. I couldn't have pre-planned that. Yet, the essential ingredient was the same. We spent time together. But there is a way of spending time together where, like, you've technically done it. Like, you got together, but it makes no impact on the relationship. Jane and I could probably list all kinds of date nights where, we technically went on something called a date. We were physically in the same place, eating at the same restaurant, But because one of us or both of us wasn't fully present, the date night didn't do much for the health of our relationship. You can do all the right things and not be in right relationship. Right relationships are the thing God cares most about. But we often settle for just doing the right things. Whether those things actually grow our relationships or not, we feel satisfied if we've at least done the things. And I think the reason we settle for the right things over right relationships is it's pretty easy to explain. Right? The right things are just 1,000 times easier to do and to measure. Let me give you an example. Every single year, at the end of the year, our church has to send a report with a bunch of numbers in it to our denomination. Those numbers include things like, on average, how many people attend your worship gathering? How much money was given to your church through the year? How many people go to your small groups? These are the kinds of questions, and there are lots of them. And I hope that you immediately see the issue. All of these questions ask, are we doing the right actions? Right? That's all they're measuring, are the right actions. Are people showing up for worship? Are they giving? Are they coming to events where they can learn and they can connect? But at no point anywhere are we asked to measure the extent to which these right actions are actually resulting in right relationships among God's people and with God. The report asks 0 questions about how many people in our church this year experienced conflict with each other, but then humbly admitted that they had done wrong, and then sought forgiveness, and then even worked to make right what they had broken. This whole experience of conflict and reconciliation, there's no questions about it. It's a lot harder to report on that kind of thing, but it strikes me, right, that there are no questions in our annual reports about the quality of the relationships that are being nurtured here. All of the questions are about the number of people who might be present. But that says nothing about what is happening among us. I think this is one of the reasons why churches can often just spend so much of their time focused on the wrong things, because people are asking them to report on stuff that doesn't matter, at least not compared to the main thing, which is right relationships. And so I wonder, what if? What if we heard Jesus' words here? And where Jesus says, blessed are those with a pure heart. What if, with a single-minded, wholehearted purity of intent, we just set before us one thing, and we said right relationships are the thing, that is everything, and we are going to invest all of our time and our energy and our hearts in that one thing, and we're going to throw ourselves into it. Right relationships with God, our Father. Right relationships with our brothers and sisters in Christ. Right relationships with our neighbors. Jesus says, blessed are those who show mercy. What if we made the mercy of God our singular passion? When Moses meets God on Mount Sinai, the very first thing God says about himself is, the Lord, Yahweh, Yahweh, I am merciful. What if the core characteristic of our God, this loyal love of God, described as mercy, what if that was our singular hunger and desire, that we would be transformed by the character of God, by the mercy of God, and that our single goal would be to extend this mercy to one another and to everyone that we can. And what if all of the things that we hunger and thirst for, right, what are those things in your life? What are the things that you seek after and desire? What are those things that do not satisfy no matter how much you keep chasing after them? What if all that we hunger and thirst for were replaced with one single driving desire to nurture right relationships? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for right relationships, for they will be satisfied. The one who makes these relationships possible, who makes us as relational people and sees us in relationship and says, this is very good. This one invites us in this moment to meet with him, to encounter him, to be present with him, to experience the joy of his presence, to receive his gifts, to hear his words of love spoken over us, to know that he sees us and knows us. This one, named Jesus, is inviting us home with him and with his Father, with him and all of our siblings. And so this morning we gather around the table to be at home in his kingdom that is in every way about relationships.